Welcome to another episode of Kookievision. In this video, I'm going to be making the Rooster of Barcelos, which is a very popular emblem from Portugal. I'm starting out with a rooster-shaped sugar cookie, and I'm tracing the outline with a number 2 tip and using a piping consistency black royal icing. Now, as I outline, I'm making sure not to outline the base of the rooster. I'm also disregarding the beak, the wattle, and the crown of the rooster, just outlining the head to finish it off here. Now, you'll often find that these decorative roosters, they have hearts on their tail feathers as well as their wings. So I'm outlining the heart on the tail feathers, and the one on the wing will come later when I do a second layer of flooding. And I'm going to be filling this in with a flooding consistency black royal icing that I have here in a squeeze bottle. Any squeeze bottle will work, but if you do have a squeeze bottle with a coupler attachment that you can use a icing tip on, you could use a number 4, which is what I'm using here. And you can see I've basically filled in the entire black shape that I have here, disregarding that heart that I put on the tail feathers. And I'm just using my scribe tool here to get all the icing towards the edges and pop any air bubbles if needed. Now I've let this black layer dry for about 20 minutes or so. It just needs to be crusted over enough to kind of support the weight of this wing that we're putting on here. So it's basically a sideways teardrop shape for the wing, and I'm tracing also as well a heart right in the middle. And again, this is a number 2 tip with a piping consistency black royal icing, and I'm filling in the wing, disregarding the heart again, with a black flooding consistency royal icing. So the same as I used to fill in the body of the rooster. And I'm just using my scribe tool to pop some of those little air bubbles that have appeared. Now, because we're using black royal icing here, you definitely want to wait a sufficient amount of time to do the colored layers on your cookie. And I will actually give you an example of what happens if you don't wait long enough, especially if your black royal icing is really concentrated. So first things first, on the other layers, or the other flooded layers, we're doing the base of the rooster, and I used a nice frosty blue for this, and I outlined it in a number 2 tip royal icing, which is a blue color, and it is a piping consistency, and I flooded it in with a flooding consistency blue of the same color that I had in a squeeze bottle, and I'm just using my scribe tool to get all that icing towards the edges. Now I want to flood in these 2 heart shapes that I have here on the wing and the tail feathers. So I've got a flooding consistency red royal icing fitted with a number 4 tip in a squeeze bottle. And again, a regular squeeze bottle will work. I just happen to have a squeeze bottle here with a coupler attachment. I find they allow a little bit more control, and you can kind of swap the tips on them, especially when you want to get into some really tight spots. But this one's fairly easy to get into as the hearts are fairly big. And I'm using a flooding consistency that's a little bit on the thicker side, just because when you do small details like this, or You want to make sure that it's on the thicker side so that you get a more poofy kind of shape and it doesn't sink in on you. And I'm just using my scribe tool to get that point towards the bottom of the heart so it's not so rounded. Next, I'm going to do the beak, so I've got a number 2 tip here with a piping consistency ivory royal icing, and I'm also filling it in with the same icing. Since it's such a small spot, I can usually get away with just using one consistency, and then just using my scribe tool to really nicely smooth it out and get rid of all those little bumps and ridges and stuff like that. You could definitely outline it and then fill it with a flooding consistency, but since it's all we need just for the beak, it's not really necessary. And I'm also going to do his wattle and his comb. So I'm using a red piping consistency royal icing with a number 2 tip, and I'm doing the outlining on these 2 parts. Now I also just want to note on the beak, I'm just using ivory because that's what I had lying around. You can use any light color really, like a yellow, gold, ivory, white, any of those colors, because I am going to actually be painting over it with luster dust in the end of it. So it doesn't really matter what color it is underneath, just as long as it's nice and light. And I'm filling in the wattle and the comb here with a flooding consistency red, so the same one that we use for the hearts. And this is a flooding consistency in a squeeze bottle. And again, I have it fitted with a number 4 tip, but you can use any regular squeeze bottle. Now I'm just using my scribe tool to get all the icing towards the edges and pop any air bubbles, and I want to let this dry overnight. Technically you can let it dry for about 6 to 8 hours until it's nice and dried, and but I often opt to let mine sit overnight and then do my details the next day just to kind of break up the workload here. And I want to show you here what happens when you get a little impatient when you're working with black royal icing and you flood colored layers right next to it. I let my black sit for about an hour, which isn't a sufficient amount of time. I didn't think it would color bleed this bad, but this one particularly did. And you definitely want to wait when you're working with black royal icing, maybe around 3 or 4 hours before you add colored layers next to it to avoid this issue. This isn't a huge deal since I'm going to be outlining it and covering up some spots. So I'm already done a gold layer on this beak, but I'm giving it a second layer here. This is a gold luster dust that I've mixed with a touch of vodka, and I've just applied it with a clean paintbrush. And I'm also going to add an outline to the entire rooster here. This is a number 1 tip. So basically I'm swapping all of my number 2 tips for number 1 tips for detail. So I'm just outlining the entire rooster, and I'm also going to outline his wing as well. So this is a number 1 tip with a piping consistency black royal icing. Now to add a little bit of a homemade looking touch here, I'm going to use my food pen. This is a Chef Master food pen. The Chef Master logo is kind of worn off there. I use it a lot on my sugar cookies. And I'm using the fine tip end of a black food pen. And I'm just doing some stitching around the hearts. And I'm also going to do some stitching around the wattle of the rooster as well. Now I'm going to start doing a lot of the details on here, and I'm using a lot of dots for this, and you'll often find this on these roosters, that they use a lot of dots and flowers and hearts and stuff like that. So I've got a number 1 tip, and this is a piping consistency red royal icing. I'm just doing a series of dots on the hearts, so I'm using bigger dots in the top rounded parts of the hearts, and then smaller as I go and taper towards the bottom of the heart. And I'm also going to outline the wattle here, and I'm going to give the comb of the rooster a nice little decorative touch as well. I'm going to do some nice little swirls on here. So I'm doing some nice swirls towards the back first, just kind of bringing it around like that, and then kind of bringing it up and around again towards the back. And I'm also going to do the same thing for the second part of the comb and for the third and fourth part as well. Now for the base of the rooster, I'm going to outline the base with a blue of the same color that I used to fill it and outline it. This is a number 1 tip piping consistency, kind of frosty blue. I'm outlining the entire base. I'm going to add a few little extra curls, some decorative curls coming up from the bottom and ending up in the top of the base. And I'm also kind of trying to match that comb that I have on the top of the rooster. I just have a lonely little dot here because I'm going to add a little candy star that I have that's part of my ginormous sprinkle collection. So I'm always using any excuse I can to use any sprinkles that I have to add a bit of a decorative touch. You can do anything you want in there. These are what they look like. You can get them online. I often find them in online baking shops. And I'm also going to be adding some dots to the rest of the design. Now you can get as intricate or as simple with this as you want. You can add more colors, you can do more dots. I'm trying to keep like a very happy medium here when it comes to detail. So I've done a bunch of dots radiating out from that heart on the tail, and they're kind of tapering off, getting smaller in size as I make them. So this is the same blue that I use for the base with the number 1 tip. And I did a little bit around his head and coming down towards his neck. Now adding more dots, I'm going to finish off that blue line of dots that I got on the head going towards the neck. I've got a piping consistency green royal icing here fitted with a number 1 tip. And I'm going to keep those dots going down towards the belly and down towards the base. Next, I'll be using a white piping consistency royal icing this time. This is a number 1 tip as well. And I'm piping the eye, and I'm also going to do an upside down teardrop just underneath the eye. This is going to be painted with gold later on, and I'm just basically applying pressure and then pulling down and letting go of pressure to create a nice little point on that teardrop. And I'm also going to be using the same royal icing, the same white, and I'm going to do a dotted border around both of these hearts. So I'm keeping these dots relatively small. And to finish off that beak, I'm just doing a quick white outline on the inside of the beak as well. Now I'm going to let this detail crust over enough so that I can paint it. I just want to add a little bit of gold to that teardrop on the rooster's face here. And again, this is a gold luster dust that I've mixed with a touch of vodka to make it paintable. And I'm using a clean brush to just apply it to that white royal icing. And just kind of take your time with this, taking care not to get any gold on top of the black, because it will be very, very visible, especially on black. And just kind of pull it towards the bottom there, get it towards the point, and that's about it. Now, like I said, you can get as intricate or as simple as you want with this. You could add more dots, do some flowers, really change it up if you like. This is the design that I opted to go with, a nice happy medium. So thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to like me on Facebook and on Instagram. Bye!